What's up, y'all? Welcome to Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast presented by Old City Sports Network, the best network for all of your Philadelphia sports needs. It's your boy, Michael Roscoe. The Eagles come out and get the win in Baltimore. We'll recap and discuss that game. Plus, we'll talk about a familiar face seeking a trade, a legend calling it a career, and what to expect going into the second preseason game versus the New England Patriots. But before all that, if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, which is just at Second and 15, and also turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single moment. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as well as for the Old City Sports Network social medias. All right, y'all, let's dive into the first topic of the week. Y'all know what it is by that point. If you've been an active follower, it is that NFL news. Sorry, technical difficulties, but former Eagle, current Jets pass rusher Hassan Reddick seeks a trade, more like a second trade. Reddick was traded from the Eagles to the Jets back in March for a 2026 conditional third-round draft pick. Now, after holding out for the duration of camp so far, racking up nearly $2 million in fines, the 29-year-old veteran is still serves, nor do the Jets have any intention of trading him, but are, quote, focusing on the players that are showing up to camp. Damn, I see the shade being thrown from a mile. I apologize for that, y'all. I do not know what had happened to my screen just now, but we're going to get right back into what we were talking about. I got to imagine that this is hard on everyone, and I've never seen a player request two trades within a short time span before. With both parties firm in their stance with this whole contract thing, who knows what'll happen? But I'm wondering what y'all think. All right, moving on. For the first time in NFL history, we saw the use of the Guardian cap during an actual game. Granted, it's a preseason game, yet it's the first steps in the NFL's attempt at maintaining player safety and reducing head and brain related injuries such as concussions and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, otherwise known as CTE. Now, back in April, the league made a rule allowing players the option to wear the caps over their helmets during the games. The most notable player to wear this cap in one of these games so far this past week was running back Jonathan Taylor out of the Indianapolis Colts, who wore it along with four of his teammates in their game against the Denver Broncos. Now, the idea of this, I really like. Is the cap itself a little goofy looking? Sure, but who the hell cares if it has the potential to make the game safer without taking away anything from the game? I know people have been pissed about all these rule changes lately. If this can prevent players from getting hurt and a rule change, that's a win in my book. Plus, Taylor was able to make it look pretty decent by putting what looked like a skull cap over it. So, I think it's a great move. I think, if we see a trend with it going on, we'll see a lot more players wearing it, but we'll just have to see as the regular season comes. Next, injuries galore. The season hasn't even started, and injuries are already plaguing the NFL. Falcons wide receiver Rondale Moore is out for the season with a knee injury. Vikings rookie quarterback JJ McCarthy is out for the season after his surgery to repair a torn meniscus. Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs is dealing with a hamstring injury. Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert is dealing with plantar fasciitis. More recently, Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison was carted off the field in Wednesday's joint practice with a potentially serious leg injury, as what it's quoted now. The list goes on. I'm not sure what's in the water this year, but hopefully things calm down and no one else gets seriously hurt because this is getting out of control. I don't know about y'all, but it's getting out of control. All right, before we go into our Eagles discussion and some special stuff for tonight, let me give you a word from our sponsors. Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast and Old City Sports Network are brought to you by Righteous Felon Craft Jerky, with some awesome craft flavors such as being gluten-free, low sugar, and American made. Head to your local store, or better yet, to righteousfelon.com and use the promo code OCSN for 15% off your order. Any orders over $50 will receive free shipping. We are also brought to you by SeatGeek. Head on over to SeatGeek.com or download the app to get your tickets and use promo code Old City Sports Network with an E at the end of old for $20 off of your purchase. And additionally, if you can't make your event for whatever reason, SeatGeek will credit you towards your next ticket. Additionally, we are presented to you by Warlord Beard Oil. Head on over to warlordbeardoil.com and use promo code OLDSPORTS for 15% off your beard oils, washes, soaps, lotions, apparel, tools, so much more. Orders over $75 will also receive free shipping. And more recently, I'm happy to announce that Old City Sports Network and Second and 15 has a new partnership with Decals by Aaron. If you're in the Delaware County, Pennsylvania area and looking for your next Delco merch, head on over to decalsbyaaron.com today. And finally, if you love supporting our sponsors and us as well, don't forget to support the ones who bring you these ads and these shows each week, such as yours truly, Second and 15, along with The Living Room Show, Flyers Alley, Check the Net, Quit Chasing, and more. To do that, head on over to oldcitysports.com and check out our merchandise. From clothes to camping supplies, glassware, you name it, head on over to oldcitysports.com and use the promo code OLDCITY for 15% off of your purchase. All right, now we're going to be moving on to that Eagles news and discussion. BDN calls it a career. And if you're a true Eagles fan, I hope you know what that acronym means. Nick Foles, 2018 Super Bowl MVP, aka Big Dick Nick, announced his retirement from the NFL, officially retiring as an Eagle on September 16th, the home opener versus the Falcons. From backup QB to Super Bowl MVP, Nick Foles will likely go down in history as one of the best Eagles quarterbacks. And you might be thinking, that's a bit of a take, but he takes the number one spot in Eagles history in career passer rating, interception percentage, most 400-yard passing games with 4, highest single game passing yards with 471, single game passing yards per attempt, and touchdown percentage, among many other equally impressive accolades. The man who brought Philly their lone Super Bowl will forever be loved by Philly fans, and for him to retire as an Eagle, where it all started from, makes it such a bittersweet moment. I can't wait to see how Philly welcomes him back in week 2. All right, we got some roster moves. We have another roster move as the Eagles have signed safety Caden Stearns from the Denver Broncos. Not the Denver safety I think Eagles fans wanted to hear, but hey, it's a good depth signing. And he's got familiarity with Vic Fangio. Nonetheless, I think it's a good sign in to help our safety room. It's been decimated by injuries from the past like 2 seasons. The more we can get at safety, the better. But to make room for Stearns, the Birds have released linebacker Shaq Quarterman, whom we got just within the past week from the Jaguars, I believe. Got a few quick injury updates for y'all. Cornerback Cooper DeJean was activated off the non-football injury list and participated in individual drills in Tuesday's joint practice with the Patriots. However, players who did not participate in this joint practice included linebacker Oren Burks with a knee injury, tight end Grant Calcaterra dealing with a shoulder injury, safety CJ Gardner Johnson with his shoulder injury, tight end Albert O with an abdomen injury, safety Caden Stearns with a knee injury. Don't know how that was so quick to happen. And then the players who were limited during this joint practice were wide receiver Paris Campbell with a groin injury, obviously Cooper DeJean with a hamstring, safety Mekhi Garner still dealing with that hamstring injury, and linebacker Brandon Smith still dealing with concussion. All right. The Ravens versus Eagles preseason recap. The Birds traveled down to I-95 to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Now, the Ravens have a history of being absolutely dominant for no reason in the preseason. It's like being the best Olympic team, but your sport is handball. I don't know what it is, but they're just dominant at a situation that doesn't really matter technically. But nonetheless, it was a great game to watch. But this time, it was our Birds that would get the last laugh. Now, original reports indicated that we would see the starters for a series or so, but they ended up sitting at the last minute as head coach Nick Sirianni was worried about the field conditions from the rainy weather. I mean, I guess that apparently he didn't give a shit about the other players. I'm totally kidding, but I understand the move. So we ended up seeing Kenny Pickett at quarterback to start. Now, he struggled passing at the right side of the field as multiple passes went incomplete with Ravens rookie cornerback Nate Wiggins in coverage. The first team defense would play a series or so, and they gave up a couple big plays to start, which had me worried a little bit, had some flashbacks from last season, but they would pick things up and hold the Ravens to a 46-yard field goal. Running back Will Shipley showed up in the first quarter, driving the ball down the middle of the field, making multiple first downs, and capped off the drive with a 7-yard touchdown pass from Kenny Pickett. The extra point was missed, however, making that score 6-3 Eagles. The Ravens would tie it up 6-6 with another Justin Tucker field goal. The defense looked much better after those first two plays, including a pass breakup, almost turned interception by Eagles first rounder pick Quinyon Mitchell. He looked excellent all game. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. On offense, Kenny Pickett wasn't able to do much, taking a couple of sacks under pressure, and the half would end 6-6. Now, third string quarterback Tanner McKee would take over for Kenny Pickett for the Eagles later in the third quarter, helping the Eagles drive down the field, which led to a rushing touchdown by running back Lou Nichols. Jake Elliott would make this extra point with the Eagles up 13-6. However, the Ravens on their offensive drive would march down the field and take advantage of a missed tackle on a 4th and 2 from cornerback Tyler Hall, and this would tie the game 13-all with a touchdown a couple plays later. The Eagles would get within field goal range on their offensive drive. However, Jake Elliott missed with 17 seconds left. An atypical miss from him. I want to know what was going on that night. The Ravens would take over the ball after that. However, the Eagles defense had one more big play up their sleeve, as on the first play of the Ravens' last offensive drive, edge rusher Patrick Johnson would strip sack and recover the ball in Ravens territory. This would set up Jake Elliott with another field goal attempt, which he would make, winning the game 16-13. Now, I liked a lot of what I saw, such as the defense capitalizing and adapting from their mistakes, something we didn't see from Jonathan Gannon in the Super Bowl game. But I also liked the drives up the middle, a little bit of pre-snap motion, not too much, but I imagine we'll see more of it in the week's game coming up. I can't imagine Kellen Moore is going to reveal all of his secrets in preseason, so I'm trusting his process and the offensive decision making so far. Overall, it was an exciting game to watch. Even with the conservative play calling, it still looked more creative than any of the shit we saw last year. Now, after this game, I got some players with their stock rising. I have a few that I believe have their stock risen after this game. Now, I'm not going to mention everybody, but just a few. So far, you got edge rusher Nolan Smith. He had multiple sacks, looked really quick and agile. He's had a great game overall. Also, linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr. leading the game in tackles. He was on fire the whole game. Definitely made an impression. It was flashbacks to his dad at this point. Running back Will Shipley making a strong contention for running back two. He had great runs up the middle, along with pretty decent yardage after contact, great blocking skills, and a rollout receiving touchdown. His skills are wild. This man is definition of dual threat. I think we found a diamond in the rough in the fourth round by drafting him. Hopefully, this trend of his continues. I really would like to see him be the running back two behind Barkley. And lastly, we had cornerback Quinyon Mitchell. He had great reads, held his own. That honestly, that pass breakup should have been an interception, but for his first NFL experience, he showed up and impressed. Well worth the first round pick so far. On the other hand, we got some players who I believe their stock is falling. This may be controversial, but the first player I have here is quarterback Kenny Pickett. I think he had a hard time under pressure. He took a couple of sacks that could have been avoided. It took him a while to figure out that throwing it to Nate Wiggins' direction was not a good idea. I swear I saw like 3 or 4 passes that were broken up by Nate Wiggins. I'm like, why are you not figuring out that this is not a good idea? I don't know. I was not impressed though. Next, I got offensive lineman Tyler Steen, mainly because he's coming off of injury and Mekhi Becton hasn't been making the competition easy for Steen. He got the starting reps over Tyler and was considered the only starter on the offense that night. Next, I got cornerback Tyler Hall. Crucial missed tackle led to a score on a couple of plays that would tie the game. You just can't have that, especially with the piss poor tackling we had last season, especially in this cornerback room. You got like 14 corners competing for like 6 or 7 positions. You can't have that to make the team. It's not going to work out for you. And finally, and it kind of pains me to say this one, but I got wide receiver Anais Smith. He's probably the only rookie, if you don't count Cooper DeJean due to injury, who hasn't been consistently performing well. He had a good start to camp. I had higher expectations for him as I was seeing him in the beginning of camp, but he's been dropping way too many catches in practice. He fumbled that punt return. Thank God it went out of bounds. And I feel like I just didn't see a lot of him in that game to really impress me. He would have to have a much better game 2 or 3 to have a shot at making the roster. It's wild that a draft pick might not make the roster, but he's got to pick it up. All right. We got more football this week. After spending the earlier part of the week in Foxborough in joint practice, your Philadelphia Eagles will face the New England Patriots Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, for those who have been an active listener since the beginning of this podcast, you'll know that as much as I possibly can, I try to have individuals who are fans of the teams that we play against each week as guests on the show to discuss the upcoming matchup, get into some banter, and whatever else just happens to come our way. So, since we got the Pats this week, I am happy to introduce this week's guest, my good buddy and New England Patriots fan, Ari Ibarra. Ari, welcome to the show.
Hey there, man. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Now we're going to get into some good questions. I know I sent them to you earlier, but we just saw something happen maybe an hour before we started filming, and I definitely want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. I'm guessing you're talking about some trades with the Falcons here.
Yep, we'll get into that. I first want to start off with, because I'm going to give an answer to this question too. Out of what you've been seeing in the offseason so far, training camp, all that jazz, what do you expect out of this game specifically for your team?
You know, a lot of the talk on the New England side of the ball has been about how much time we got to see Bailey Zapp on the field versus how much time we got to see of other quarterbacks. A lot of people are calling for less Zapp time. You know, the past we were very happy for Zappy time, but now I think folks are kind of turned off a little bit from that. We're looking to see a little more time from the two rookies we drafted. Mac Jones is gone. So, who's going to fill that top spot? I think a lot of people doubt that it's going to be Bailey Zapp. I think folks are looking to really see, whether we get more time out of Joe Milton or whether Drake may, get some more snaps with the first team or even with the second team, right? Wherever they get the snap count, I think folks are looking to see some more time from our two rookies on the field. In terms of what the team's looking for out of the game, probably a little more strength from the O-line, trying to maybe test out what the wide receiver room is going to look like, at least in terms of depth chart order, who are going to be our top guys to go to. I think our running room's locked pretty much. So we're really looking to see how our offense does. I think also now curious with the trade that just happened today, what impacts are we going to see with no Judon on the defensive end of the ball?
Yeah, they definitely already logged the new player in the depth chart for the starting will linebacker position so far. I'll get into that as one of my little bonus questions since it was just fresh off the press. But I like that. Yeah, you definitely have an interesting quarterback room. Drafting two quarterbacks in the same draft, I could be wrong. I feel like I hadn't seen that before, or at least not in a very long time. Both were great at their respective colleges. It'll be interesting to see how that comes about for y'all in the game, what that quarterback rotation is going to look like. Is Zappy's time getting zapped for sure? I think he's fourth on the depth chart now. But for my team, I'm hoping to see a little more of Kellen Moore's offense, especially like a series or two with the first team, since we didn't see them last year due to the weather conditions of the field. And I get it. That field was getting like chunked up. As soon as a player made a hard step, you see a little bit of turf just fling over to the side or whatever. I'm like, somebody could tear an ACL or some shit off of that. But specifically, I want to see more of the pre-snap motion and these incredible routes that we've been seeing. Kellen Moore has just revitalized the offense. Nick Sirianni has dialed back a little bit, let Kellen just take the reins. Came about with that article last week about Nick Sirianni and his, how much blame should he have really received for the collapse last year. He's kind of like that, he was the catalyst of the play calling or the play call overruling from Brian Johnson. It didn't work out. But what we've seen so far in camp with this new offense, routes in the middle of the field, which we hadn't seen before last year. Amazing route running from A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, hell, even Saquon Barkley. We've been seeing some real good route running in joint practices so far, including a 30-yard plus wheel route turn touchdown from Jalen Hurts to Saquon Barkley. It was just perfectly placed. You'd have to look it up. But I'd like to see more of the rookies, especially with corner Quinyon Mitchell, running back Will Shipley, and wide receiver Johnny Wilson. These guys have been the standout rookies, in my opinion, so far. I doubt we're going to see Cooper DeJean. There's a chance he plays in the third preseason game. I think it's just too quick of a comeback from the hamstring injury, but we don't know for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing A.J. Brown and Christian Gonzalez, that battle the entire time that they're on the field. You got a young, talented corner and a very physical veteran wide receiver. This, to me, is going to be the matchup to watch. All right, so we're going to dive into a little bit of Q&A for my guest, Ari, over here. So I sent you a couple questions just kind of gauging your opinion on this so far. So the first question, your team drafted two quarterbacks, Drake May, 3rd overall, and Joe Milton, the 3rd in the 6th round. What do you think this says about the front office's faith in current quarterbacks Jacoby Brissett and Bailey Zappi? And by the time the final roster cuts have been made, who do you think will be the odd man out? Because I sure as hell know they ain't keeping 4 quarterbacks on that roster.
Yeah. I don't think we're looking to stick with just one backup like we have in prior years, but I don't think we're looking to keep a bunch of guys out here. And don't forget that I think we also got Trace McSorley on there too, so don't forget him. I doubt he's going to stick
Are you serious?
I believe so, unless
Oh
that
my
move's already
God.
been made. So, but I think that's not likely to happen. So, not really worth the conversation here. Sorry, Trace. But yeah, with the two veterans right on the team, Bailey and Jacoby. Bailey, he had his moments last year and last week. Unfortunately, those moments, especially over the years, have been good and bad moments. And so, yeah, I don't think that the front office has much faith there. In terms of bringing it, in terms of Jacoby Brissett, he's a veteran quarterback. He's kind of a stopgap solution. He's played with the Pats before. He's got starter experience. Then a lot of backup experience. I think a little bit of a journeyman too, right? Finns, Browns, Commanders. The only way I really see this working out is if Gerard has a plan for our rookies to kind of sit on the bench and learn behind someone, then I think Jacoby's the guy to learn behind between Zapp and Brissett. But otherwise, overall, drafting two quarterbacks never speaks well for the veterans room. I don't think that there's much faith in these guys long term. Maybe short term options, maybe some stability, maybe something to learn behind. But I think when you look at the two picks, right, that we have between Joe Milton and Mac Jones, or sorry, and Drake May, Drake May, first round, third overall. He's, I think, the de facto focus of the offensive rebuild. So we're looking at a first round starter, maybe second string learner, depending on our strategy. Joe Milton was kind of a shock, I think, to folks, right? We got one of the top guys in the draft.
Definitely. That took me by surprise. I mean, he was good at Tennessee, don't get me wrong, but like you guys just drafted Drake May third overall, and then you go in the sixth round and you get another quarterback. You now have a 4 to 5 quarterback room, and what are you going to do with that?
That being said, he has the tools. He's got strength. He's got size. He has athleticism. We got to see a little bit of him last week against the Panthers. Granted, it's the Panthers, right? We're talking preseason. We're talking Panthers.
Very small sample size.
Little bit of shade that I'm throwing there, but he did get a nice start downfield to Jaquay Jackson for a touchdown. He did have a good run after being forced outside the pocket. He showed some composure in some weird situations, so all this points towards maybe long-term potential to compete, or maybe just a high upside backup. But when you're looking at the veterans room, I think Joe Milton, I think the Patriots in this rebuild phase, I think we're more comfortable taking chances on backups, and seeing what else is out there in Joe Milton. So overall, from what I'm looking at, I think Milton could also go to the practice squad, but I think it's more likely that one of these veterans becomes the odd man out, with either Brissett leading the room and Zappy, going to find somewhere else, or Brissett's role otherwise becomes, I think, the most redundant. So
now, I think with the recent injuries that Vikings have had, I could see Bailey Zappi being the odd man out and then getting a call from Minnesota because JJ McCarthy's out for the season.
Yeah,
and they have Sam Darnold. I don't know who else they have, but if Zappi's the odd man out, that wouldn't be a bad, solution to that quarterback room. If you get a call from Minnesota and be like, we need somebody.
Absolutely, and we'll see. Overall, I think, like I said, the veterans that we have on our chart right now, I don't think either of them is viewed as the long-term solution. We're certainly looking towards our rookies for our at least midterm and long-term solutions, right? Maybe the short term, we'll see how that plays out, but it's one of those two veterans I think isn't going to make the cut this year.
I like it. It's not a bad it's not a hot take. I think it's pretty reasonable.
Absolutely.
Okay. Speaking of this rebuild, you got a whole ton of moves going on. Juju Smith-Schuster was released in a major move. You have 2024 second-round pick Jalen Polk projected as your wide receiver 3. You got Kendrick Bourne starting off training camp on the PUP list. Do you think this wide receiver room can get the job done?
Great question. We still got Devontae Parker, right?
No, you don't. You don't have Devontae Parker. He went to the Eagles and then he retired.
You're correct. You're correct. We still had Devontae Parker. We don't. I think Tyquan Thornton, is looking like one of our options. You mentioned Jalen Polk. He was our second round pick, I think. So that's an option. We otherwise, we have a lot of names that aren't really top on people's radars. Kendrick Bourne, like you said, he's on PUP, so it depends on how long he's out. Are we going to see him this season? Not 100% sure. I haven't been able to find too much news on that. But
now, if he's able to get off the PUP list before week 1, that'll help you guys out. But if he can't, he has to spend a minimum of 4 games off of that. So let's say he heals up by like 3 days after the first game. That kind of puts you all in a shitty position for the next 3 because you don't have your starting wide receiver 1.
And I think one way or another, when we look at just the wide receiver room, it's not the most inspiring, if I'm being honest. But if we consider the tight ends as part of the downfield core, I think we get a little more comfortable. I don't think it's a return to the good old glory days, in terms of downfield options for our team. But when you consider the tight ends that we have, I think that brings a little more alleviation to the pressure on the wide receivers. Overall, though, I think there's low confidence in this wide receiver room having breakout stars. Maybe looking more as a team unit, who comes out and develops themselves into a product that gets a lot of return value for the Patriots. Is what we're curious to see.
Now you got a few guys who are still in free agency, like was it Hunter Renfrow? I think is still a free agent, is available option. You could get John Mechie from the Texans, if he gets a call. I look at that list, and I don't mean to be biased because I'm an Eagles fan, but our wide receiver room just blows y'all out of the water.
100%. I mean, I was watching practice rounds, the joint practice, as you probably were. I saw some good things from our cornerbacks. Christian Gonzalez for us did pretty well against your wide receiver room, but overall, I mean, like AJ Brown.
Dude, Devontae Smith had a nasty route on Christian Gonzalez, though. I don't know if you saw that one.
He did, but you guys weren't looking that direction too much, and I think you won 2 of 5 matchups. So against the wide receiver room that you all have, not so bad at all. And he had some real good swats. I think he broke up a good pass against Dallas Goedert as well. So, I'm not throwing any shade on our defense. Patriots defense been kind of the focal point for the past few years. We've had a top defense, and going back to our wide receiver room though, I think you're correct, right? When you look at your team versus our team, in terms of wide receivers and downfield weapons. There's certainly room for improvement. I'd say, it leaves something to be wanted for the Patriots side. But we have to remember, this is a long-term rebuild, right? You can't go from Bill Belichick and Tom Brady to Belichick and a few different options, kind of a small rotating room. Obviously, Mac Jones was a project there, but we had a few other folks jump in and out. So now we got Gerard Mayo, and we'll see how this team forms up, right? How much, obviously it looks like this year we're still probably going to stick with being run heavy on the offense, or at least run centric on the offense. But I could be completely wrong, right? There's not much I can tell you about the Gerard Mayo way at this point. So we'll see how that wide receiver room develops. I mean, at the end of the day, there's certainly increased pressure on Thornton, and without there being Smith-Schuster, if Bourne is able to play, there's going to be increased pressure on him. But we're really looking to see, what do we get out of the rookies that we have? Overall, I think depth and experience are concerns in our group.
Yeah, I agree. I think the rebuild, it's definitely a process. It's not something you can do one night, especially after a huge, dynasty time period like you all had for, 20 years? Yeah.
Don't forget it.
Oh, trust me, you don't let me forget it. I'm just wondering, is this rebuild worth it right now with this wide receiver room? Obviously, moves are being made. You're in a rebuild period. It's quite obvious. You got rid of Smith-Schuster. You just got rid of Matt Judon. You have, like you said, not your top name wide receivers. Do you think they'll spend next year's draft kind of going like wide receiver heavy or like offensive player? Because your defense seems to be in a decent position. You're at a need of an edge now, but that kind of leads me into my next question. You know, Matt Judon, for those who didn't know, was just traded like an hour before we started this to the Atlanta Falcons for a 2025 third round pick. Now, this, according to ourlads.com, would make Anthony Jennings your starting will linebacker. So, what do you think of this move and what is going on with this whole, you know, rebuild, you know, just releasing players, letting players go? It just seems like you're starting from scratch.
It does definitely seem to indicate a major shift in the team's base, the team's foundation, and where the team's going. Right. I think Judon's probably one of the last big names left over from years prior. I mean, it's not like we had too many left out there in the past few years. We obviously still have some veterans who've been with the team for forever and ever, and that's, you know, awesome, right? Those guys are essential. But you know, I think it does mark a shift in where we're going with Gerard Mayo. I think he's certainly looking to invest in the future versus putting stock in today. You know, we see that in the wide receiver room, like we just discussed. We see that, I think, a little bit on the O-line. We see that now we on the defense, right? Defense typically an area where we're not too happy moving folks out unless we have someone to fill the slot, right? The endless rotating room of quarterbacks on our team over the past few years, where somehow year after year we produce top cornerbacks, you know, in the league. But we'll see. I mean, it does indicate that we're moving to look, you know, forward rather than, you know, focus on this year. And I think that's fine. You know, there's certainly going to be people who will argue against it. I think it's too fresh to have any real analysis. Like you said, it's hot off the press, but you know, I certainly liked watching him play with us. You know, I'm certainly going to miss watching him on the defense. He's one of the top sack guys on our team.
Oh yeah,
it'll be
interesting, like 66 and a half sacks over the past couple of years, I think.
Yeah, I mean, last year he didn't get to play too much due to injury, but
still had 4 sacks.
I mean, in the 4 games he played, right? So,
oh God, I had a good question. So, like, I think now with, you know, with these releases and this kind of opening up, do you think that the plan might be, you know, to free up enough cap space to do a big name signing, since there still are some big names in free agency? You got Justin Simmons. You know, there's reports that he's talking with the Saints, but he would be a good free agent signing. We've been trying to nab him for like, God, months now. Everyone hasn't shut up about it, including myself. But do you think that, you know, this gives you all the opportunity to go get a couple of big game guys just for like security, even if it's not like top name guys, just for security? Because you already are dealing with some injuries. You got Cole Strange, you got Kendrick Bourne. I think you got a couple other guys who are questionable or on injury reserve. Do you think these moves allow them to kind of get a little bit of more, maybe like 2 or 3 lower level players for that security depth?
Yeah, you know, that's actually a really good thought there. You know, I'm not a fan of rushing into trades, especially at this point, or acquisitions at this point. Sorry. You know, if there's not the talent out there, you know, why go and throw a bunch of money at it? But you know, if you're looking at like maybe 1 year stopgap contracts on some folks that aren't getting signed elsewhere just to build depth, I don't think that's a bad idea. I would be a little worried if we picked up someone who hasn't proven themselves as a top, you know, as a top contender in their position in the league right now, and we threw him a 5-year, you know, tens of millions of dollars contract.
Oh, they're getting 1-year contracts at best.
Exactly. So, you know, and that's not a bad idea. It's not like we've had a shortage of cap space, I think. So I don't think it changes too much in terms of this season. Maybe we pick up a few more folks and just, you know, see what we land up with, right? Go grab the candy bag and see what you get. But yeah, I don't think it's going to change too much. Maybe just add some depth. Maybe just, you know, we got two more preseason games, you know, maybe just have some guys in, see what they're capable of, see where you go. But I certainly think it doesn't change the fact that we're in a rebuild. We're looking at our rookies right now. You know, we're looking at fresh names to step up and prove themselves so that we can continue over next year. Probably, you know, I think that's when we're going to see a lot more moves, and that's gonna anger a lot of diehard fans who want to see, you know, us competing year after year after year. And you know, that's what Patriots fans was. We've grown used to that over the past 2 decades.
It's a generation of dynasty that you got. That's for some people, that's
Absolutely.
their entire lives.
And it's hard to adjust, you know. So a lot of fans who are not Patriots fans happy to see us down, but yeah, I think it's wise to take your time on a rebuild. I've seen a lot of other teams rush into the process, and you know, very rarely does that, I think, work out or result in a good long-term future. So
I like it. It makes sense to me. Okay. Y'all replaced legendary coach Bill Belichick with Gerard Mayo as an interior linebacker coach who's helped the Pats defense finish in the top 10 4 times under his belt. How do you think his success in a defensive position will translate to a head coach where typically offense is their primary focus?
yeah, you know, I don't think it's really as big a shift, you know, as a lot of people are saying, at least in terms of mentality. Yeah, maybe obviously it's 20 years of Bill, 20 years of one philosophy, 20 years of one guy doing, you know, he was head coach, GM, he did everything, you know. So in that regard, definitely a big shift. But in terms of being, you know, a guy who comes with a heavy defensive background, you know, that's consistent with Bill. He's been working under Bill for a long time. He's provided the Patriots with the defense, you know, one of the top defenses, surprisingly, right? For how we've landed. You know, one of the better defenses. Obviously, we had struggles, but I wonder how many of those struggles last year were simply because we couldn't get the ball rolling on the offense. So if you remove that aspect, I think the defense performed very well when the offense, you know, did their part. So I don't think it's going to have too much of a shift on the defensive side. But your question is, you know, how does that translate to the offense? And I don't know if we're going to get to see too much of that, other than, you know, I'm not sure we're going to get to see how that plays out this season, especially when we look at, you know, topics we just discussed, like wide receiver room not being, you know, star-studded. Our offensive line hasn't really been improved all that much. So I'm not sure we even have the pieces right now to kind of see, you know, any philosophical changes have any impact on the offensive side of the ball. I don't really know. We'll see where it goes. But I think he's going to have to work pretty closely with the rest of our offensive coaches, you know, and assistants, to kind of see what, maybe there's some scheme changes. Maybe we play a little more loosely with the, you know, in terms of maybe a little more RPO, maybe we explore some different themes, but you know, it's a big question mark as much as it is for you. It's a big question mark for me. And I think a lot of other Patriots fans as well, you know, how that's going to translate. I think we have to see, and I think we're going to get to at least see whether he's able to have the composure to put together a team and figure out a good balance of, you know, maybe he gets involved, maybe he stays a little more hands off. You know, I know you guys have had to navigate some of that with your head coach on hands on, hands off with the offense.
Hands off. Get Sirianni away from the play calling, please.
And so, you know, I think we have yet to see how that'll play out in real time. You know, off season, training camp, these practice, you know, these joint practices and preseason, they're never really a great gauge for how a team's going to do in the regular season, or how a team's going to play in the regular season. If you ask me, I think it's good for the players to kind of get in the rhythm a little bit, and it's good for coaches to kind of figure out, you know, the last moves on their squads, who's in, who's out. But we'll really see where it goes. I don't know that we have enough of a base of information to make any calls on that.
No, I mean, I totally get it. Like, I mean, it's preseason for a reason. This gives you the chance to like make those mistakes, kind of do those ballsy calls during joint practices or preseason games. You know, it gives you a blank canvas, if you will, especially when you have such big changes like head coach, or in our case, we have 2 new coordinators again. This is Jalen Hurts, what, 4th or 5th coordinator. So that's a lot. That's a lot of change and transition, and it creates it makes it a deficit to obtain some kind of like stability, you know, because of all these changes, all these things. But I think what I liked about Kellen Moore going into this season so far is Jalen Hurts was his number one and is his number one priority. He knows the talent that Jalen possesses, despite everything that happened last season. People want to talk about last season and the disconnect between Sirianni and Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts. Whose fault was it? Who gives a shit? This is last season. We're not in last season. We're in this season. But what I liked about Kellen Moore coming in this time around is he was like, Jalen is my focus. I am going to come in and I'm going to help make him the dynamic athlete that we saw out of 2022, like I know he has always been. People love to hate on him because, it's a trendy thing to hate on Philly or whatever. But if you look at like his accolades and his, you could look at injury history. Sure. Like he played last year with a bum knee and still managed to lead the league in rushing touchdowns. Granted, a lot of people want to say, oh, it's tush push merchant bullshit, whatever. He had multiple touchdowns that were like within, 7 to 10 yards of rushing. So who cares how you do it as long as you get it, in my opinion. But what I think like this gives the whole preseason and kind of falling back to that is it's a blank canvas. It gives the chance to figure out, one, who deserves to be on the roster spot. Two, who might be in the wrong position to start with. Because, you have some players who start at corner, then maybe they go to safety, and then they just explode at that position, even though they might have been a great corner in college. We're seeing it right now with James Bradbury going from corner to safety. It sets a good safety security room, but Bradbury just absolutely shit the bed last year. But it gives us a chance to figure that out, to see if it is worthy to bite the bullet of this contract that we would eat up if we were to release him, or will this change be enough to get him over the hump of, just a terrible season? All right. I got one last question for you. Now your team, Patriots, they went 4-13 last year. What mistakes do you think they need to correct or have already corrected in order to have a more successful 2024?
Well, look, before I jump into what needs to be corrected, let me, we focus so much on the negatives of our team, of my team, this podcast, probably an effect of being on an Eagles podcast, and that 1-1 record in the Super Bowl that we have against each other. But let me start off by saying
we're due for a tiebreaker.
I mean, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Maybe not with the teams that we have right now. I'd love to
give it 10
it.
years.
But I'd love to see it. You can't say that they weren't entertaining games.
For sure.
But I'd like to take a moment to focus on some things that we have done well, right? As a whole, our defensive unit has functioned very well. Our running room was absolutely solid. Very few teams manage to pull off the running back by committee or have a guy that can step up and fill the roles if one guy goes down. I mean, our team has been able to do that time and time again. Problem is we've relied a little bit too much on those two things, and when we go and look at last year, right, we had quarterback instability. I talked about it a little bit earlier when I mentioned, Mac Jones was quote unquote the guy, but we also saw, Bailey come in and finish out games. We saw Brissett come in and play snaps, when arguably, we never got too much information from Bill in press conferences, but you never knew, was he making a call to see, maybe there's competition. Maybe he just wanted to give Mac some time on the, to rest up. Who knows? But like we had quarterback instability for sure. We struggled there. We were unable, none of those guys were seemingly able to establish themselves as the starter, who we could lean on week in, week out. And I think we've started to work towards correcting that one, right? We've drafted two guys. Obviously, Drake May is the favorite to start or be the long-term option. But Joe Milton, like I said, we saw some flashes last week. Maybe there's something there. Maybe he's just a really good prototype for a solid, high upside backup. We'll see where that goes. But I think we've already started to correct that. And I think we got a new quarterback coach in TC McCartney. So hopefully that leads to long-term development, long-term stability at that position, which I think in today's NFL is more important than ever, right? You don't have a quarterback, you don't have a team.
Absolutely.
And so I think we're starting to correct that one. Next, offensive line struggles. Our O-line was inconsistent. That probably had an impact on each of those guys who I just mentioned before, right? How much can you blame a quarterback who is consistently getting pressured, consistently running around? Very few guys are able to consistently handle that. And sometimes you have an A-type player who can handle that, run out of the pocket. Other guys are not built for that. It's what you get sometimes. So, but the offensive line was inconsistent. There was poor pass protection, even difficulty in the run game, which all the more respect to the guys who were in the running room last year. So I think if we did focus a little bit on improving the offensive line, bringing in new coaching talent, we got Kugler. So hopefully that'll refine some of our work on the O-line. We'll see how that goes. Again, I think we're working towards it, whether these changes result, in massive differences this year or not. I don't know. It's a process, especially when you're not bringing in top name guys, in terms of talent, like, weapons and in the wide receiver room is something we talked about, right? But when you're not bringing in star names, then it takes a little bit of time to develop your team into a top product. So I think where we need to correct ourselves still is the wide receiver room. We talked about that. I'm not going to jump into that again, but obviously we have some rookies. We got rid of some of our old names. Juju is gone. That's okay. That's okay by me. Kendrick Bourne, I'm hopeful that he comes out and plays this year, that he's off the PUP list before week 1. Even if he's not off the PUP list by week 1, I'm hopeful that we can at least get him, for 13 of the games, after that first 4-week, I guess, requirement, right, that they can't play if they're not off the PUP list by week 1. So we'll see, but definitely our tight ends are something to look forward to, right? I think we have options in our tight end room. They should provide a little more stability, a lot of check down options, and maybe some additional blocking on the line to assist that O-line development. Lastly, I think special teams. We had some critical mistakes, but last year we're not going to focus on the specifics of those. But, we have a new coordinator. I think we're looking at improving those. When it comes down to just kicking in returns is like a huge thing. Let's kind of bring some stability there. Obviously, they've changed for at least this year how kickoffs work. So maybe a little less impact there. But I think any team that can get ahead of this change on special teams will have at least a little bit of an advantage for a few games, and that could be what turns the tide in some games, right? That any amount of yards, any amount of points can make or break, a team, can make or break a season, can change the outlook of the league. So those are probably the areas that we need to focus on the most. And I think we started to see some changes, right? It's always difficult when you have such a significant regime change. But we have time at the very least, right? We have time. We have cap space. We have the ability to draft in the future. And as long as we don't have Jets GMs doing our drafting, I think we're all right.
Yeah, or the Raiders.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, all right. I appreciate you hopping on this week's episode. I'm hoping.
Yeah. Oh, hot take here though. Hot take
Yes.
here. I think we end 9-8.
Okay.
9-8.
It's not
a hot take. Pretty balanced, right in the center of the room.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's out of pocket. Now, if you had said 12-5, I'd be like, all right, slow down.
No, I don't think so. But I think we're adding 5 wins to that abysmal season we had last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think for both of our teams, it can only go up from here.
Yep. Well, they love to hate you when you're on top. So and enjoy a little taste of the Patriots way while you guys are there.
Well, we'll try our best. All right. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode, man. We'll watch the game tomorrow. It's on NFL Network, so we'll be able to see it no matter where we are. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that does it for this week's episode. I'm thankful that you all could join in despite the technical difficulties and everything that goes about with that. Just as a reminder, the Eagles versus Patriots pregame number 2 will air tomorrow on NFL Network at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to be taking notes, looking to see if we see some of those predictions that I had going on, seeing, if the starters get a series or two. I'm hoping. I would love to see what this, Hurts Barkley tandem has in action against, not our own defense. Once again, thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to stay fly like an eagle. And as always, go Birds.